we'll have to keep making efforts to see how best we can move forward in the dynamic society in a positive way. I will now request the third speaker of the day, Professor Dipankar Gupta, and with a short introduction for him. Professor Gupta is a professor in the Center for the Study of Social System in the Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, from 1980 to 2009. He took voluntary retirement. He worked for 2 years in Delhi University, Department of Sociology. He is author of Context of Authenticity, Sikh Identity in a Comparative Perspective, which has been published by the Oxford University Press. So I request Dipankar to please take on the stage. Thank you.
Professor, you need to unmute yourself.
Am I audible now?
Yes, you're okay now.
Well, thank you very much. Being the third speaker, I have an advantage because I don't have to go through some of the terrain which has already been taken care of, and that's very, very important. However, my song will be largely based on how did the Sikhs come to terms with their lives post 1984, which was a very traumatic period. Normally, one would have felt that a community that has been through such hardship would fold up or be completely alienated. Neither of the two happened. I think that is very interesting. During those years, in 1984, not 84, but after that, around 1987, 88, I began to travel in Punjab to understand exactly what was going on to the best of my abilities. And I came across a very interesting phenomenon, which I don't think has been said so or talked about so far. Or maybe it has, I perhaps missed out on that. And that is this, that no matter where I went, hello? Am I visible, audible?
हाँ जी हाँ जी थोड़ी आवाज आ रही है
Perfectly audible, Dipankar, go on.
So no matter where, during my travels, no matter where I went, yeah, I didn't just go to Chandigarh. Went to Patiala, Chandigarh, Jalandhar, Tarantaran, Amritsar, everywhere, Firozpur. No matter where I went, during those very, very difficult days, remember those were tumultuous years. Things were happening in the country. The aftermath of 1984 was very, very vivid. People had lost lives. There was a lot of anxiety amongst non-Sikhs in the country, particularly after those stories about attacks in buses where Hindus were purportedly pulled out and shot. In that background, wherever I went, and I want to make this point because I think that links to how the Sikhs have been able to come back and play a very prominent role after 1984. No matter where I went, I looked absolutely non-Sikh. I don't have a turban and a beard. I don't speak good Punjabi at all. But no matter where I went, I never faced any discrimination whatsoever. In fact, I was a bit surprised on certain occasions which were very religious in character, and you might say even a very charged atmosphere. Nobody looked at me twice. They took me to be just another ordinary person. And I took this to be a great, how should I put it, acknowledgement of humanity amongst the Sikh people. I remember going to Damdama Sahib on Baisakhi Day. I think it was 1988, I'm not very sure. But everybody in Punjab was talking about Khalistan and the rest of it. And in the bus, I was sitting in the bus of Batinda, and every 3 kilometers or 4 kilometers, I can't be exact about it, people would enter the bus, Sikhs would enter the bus with prasadam and hand them out to people. And they'd walk past me. I'm the only non-Sikh in the bus. And they didn't even stop and say, "What are you doing?" Not even once. And when I reached the temple, the people outside said, "Well, you've come here now, you better tie a turban." And they pulled out a saffron turban and placed it on my head. In the Damdama Sahib, there were meetings going on. I went to one such meeting, and when they saw me, they asked me to come up to the stage, and they said that here is a Hindu Prof from Delhi. And they called me Hindu Pra, and I've never been called a Hindu Pra in my life. Been called that, and I didn't see any animosity there. It was just a matter of fact statement. And I think that is where I began to realize that if you have to understand the Sikhs, you can't just see them as a community in isolation. They're always reaching out, they're always forming coordinates and relationships around them, which is why I would like to second what Professor Jodhka said, that Sikhs live in India, and that aspect has to be kept in mind. If you want to understand how the Sikhs have bounced back, you cannot understand that if you just look at Sikhs in themselves as an isolated entity, which is why I also think that Sikhs should not be considered as a minority in the classical sense. They may be so in terms of demography, but the Sikhs never saw themselves as a minority. In fact, they said, we are the best Indians. We fight for India, we feed India. Besides, we are the best looking people. So we are the best Indians. And they had no hesitation in making that point. And I believe they're right. So if you want to understand how the Sikhs came back, is because they were never away. They were always part of India and just needed a little effort on the part of the center to make this work. During those years, I rarely, you must believe me, I rarely met a Khalistani. And when I met a Khalistani, he was kind of shamefaced about it. And the real anxiety most of them had was not about separation and secession. That was not on the agenda. What was on the agenda was something quite different. And that is, we have been misunderstood. We have been badly treated. Why are we being subjected to all of this? That was uppermost in their minds. There was a grievous injury that they all felt psychologically. Of course, many of them also suffered physically, but that injury was very, very apparent. And no matter where I went, I was face to face with that all the time. Why did this happen to us? What have we done to deserve this? On many occasions, I found in the homes of people brand new books about who is a Sikh, why, what is a Sikh. They all wanted to know what is there in Sikhism that should arouse such animosity. And I think that was really a very, very important question for me as well. Why should the Sikhs feel this sense of alienation when the whole country, or at least some leaders at least, were saying that the Sikhs want to secede from India? If I look at the pre-partition history of Punjab, I find that a large number of Sikhs who were prominent in the movement, they were Panthik and they were Congress at the same time. In fact, even after independence, the movement of Akalis to Congress and so forth was so obvious and so apparent and so everyday. It wasn't that spectacular at all. So the point really is that the idea of secession was never on the agenda for a large number of people. And if it ever came up, it was an expression of hurt, not an ambition and not an aspiration as such. There may have been some people saying that stuff, but not in general. And I think this is where there is a divide. I will not say the divide is very clear, but there is one between Indian Sikhs and the diaspora Sikhs. And I think the diaspora Sikhs should also try their best to understand that the Sikhs in India are the ones who are really facing all kinds of problems here. And they're the ones who are in fact making lives better for everybody in this country and for Sikhs abroad. Yes, of course, the point really is that in spite of all this, how did it happen that the Sikhs have taken such an important and prominent role soon after the 1990s were inaugurated? They were waiting, I think, in the 80s for a healing touch. And that healing touch had to happen because they weren't really interested in secession at all. What they wanted was, please do not behave this way with us. Treat us as we, as we ought to be treated. And when VP Singh went to Punjab at that time, you might remember he was given a tumultuous welcome. And in the background of what? In the background of many militant organizations saying that we should not accept his visit to Punjab. Even so, he got a tumultuous welcome And you might also remember that during those elections, there was a massive turnout, a record turnout, which only shows that the Sikhs wanted to be understood. They were not keen on secession. They weren't keen on being a minority population. They wanted to be understood, and they were deeply hurt at the way in which they were treated. Now, when Surinder talked about Seva, I think there is the key to the way in which the Sikhs have been able to propel themselves to the fore. Seva is a very important thing in Sikh religion. All too often I'm asked this question, and I don't always have a proper answer, but I think I've sort of fumbled and found my answer to the best of my abilities. You see, in almost every religion, they talk about compassion, they talk about love, they talk about generosity, about kindness. But in Sikhism, there's something very different. Here, the laity, the ordinary Sikh person, is the hero. It's not the Pandit, it's not the Maulvi, it's not the deacon, it's not the priest, not the archbishop. The real hero is the everyday Sikh, and the everyday Sikh is a real hero in the sense that the seva that Sikh perform is an important aspect of the ritual engagement as religious, as believers. So they don't do seva, they don't do charity work as something which is an add-on, something you do after everything is done, something which is, some very, very motivated people might do. They're not interested really in charity. They're not interested in donations even. Charity and donations come as a fallout of seva. Seva is the most important thing. And from seva, everything else follows. Seva is when you are in the forefront, you are in the midst and thick of things. You have first-hand intimate contact. That is what seva is. So you enter a Sikh temple. When I first went to a Sikh temple, I was totally taken aback because I never knew of a religious institution or a temple or a Gurudwara. I hadn't been to Gurudwaras earlier. It was so clean, so neat, and there was a certain sense of participation. Even the ordinary Sikh, who was not religious in outward appearance at least, knew the prayers. And when the Granthis were singing, they were singing along. When the part was being recited, they knew many of the words and verses. That kind of relationship between the laity and the virtuoso is a very, very distinctive feature of Sikhism. And this, I think, is what has allowed the Sikhs to come back time and time again through centuries. It's not just 1984. The Sikhs have faced all kinds of deprivations through history, but they've always come back because they've always seen themselves as people who do seva first and foremost. And seva is an important aspect of Sikh religion and ritual performance. It is not an add-on. It's not something that extraordinary people do. It's not something that Mahatmas do, or gurus do, or preceptors do, or swamis do. Everybody does. To do seva is everyday, quotidian, religious, ritualist aspect of Sikhs. And this car seva is then radiates outside the Gurudwara because car seva, the God's home, is everywhere. And I think that is what has brought the Sikhs in close contact, intimate relationships, and in a kind of relationship where the non-Sikhs are in constant adulation and admiration, simply because the Sikhs are doing just what they're supposed to do. They're not doing something that they're not supposed to do. They're not going out of the way to be something else. They're just being themselves. And being themselves creates a big difference because other people then realize that this is what Sikhism is all about. And I hope this also teaches many Sikhs how to be humble, because there's so much adulation pouring in that sometimes I worry about it, that will it go to their heads? And I hope it does not. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dipankar ji. You've been able to sum up much quicker than I expected, basically. I think thanks a lot. You covered everything. The issue what you mentioned and what Surinder Jodhka did mention, that Sikhs do not consider themselves to be a minority. Well, that's a Sikh psyche. It's a concept by itself. But we must accept the reality that we are a very small, thin minority in whole India, or world for that purpose. Though from the hearts of hearts, we do not consider ourselves a minority, but the ground reality is that we have to be following that tradition. what the Constitution has laid down, whether it's forced on us or otherwise, we'll have to live with that thing. Now, the minority commissions which have been set up, probably taking care of that. It's a constitutional, constitutional requirement which has been done, and it's been well respected now. Whether people appreciate or not, or the state government like it or not, or they implement or not, a different story. But the philosophy of giving protection to the sizable small population within the country is certainly there in all over India. Now, the other issue which has been very clearly been said about the Seva, well, Seva is a part of the Sikh psyche, and I think it will continue to all time to come. Comparing about the diaspora and India, there is a conflict of there is a conflict of interest. There you find majority in the educated lot, especially in the advanced countries, barring part of little part in California or in Canada, where you had the rural masses who had gone earlier on with a little lesser educational background, but now if they are mixing up with the society, they're integrating with the society and taking part in the public life, I mean the political life, well, they have been able to integrate well, and hats off to them for their wisdom and for their understanding of the local psyche. Thank you very much once again. And I proceed further. We have the next speaker with us. Mr. Amandeep Sandhu. Now, Sandhu was born in Rourkela, Odisha. He studied at the University of Hyderabad and now lives in Bangalore. Amandeep is an author of 2 novels, Sepia Leaves, Rupa, 2008, and Roll of Honor, 2012. This is about a split loyalties of a Sikh boy in a military boarding school in Punjab during the Khalistan movement. The Khalistan movement, again, terminology was given by somebody else. It has been wrongly imposed on the Punjab for the reason best known to the our politicians for their selfish gain. This book has been, nominated for the Hindu Prize in 2013 and has been translated into Punjabi. In late 2019, Amandeep published another non-fiction Punjab Journey Through the Front Line. This is a book has been long listed by the NIF Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay Award and 2020 and shortlisted for the Atta Gulata BLF Non-Fiction Prize 2020. He also writes short story, has interest in essays for Caravan, for Hindu, Scroll, and Business Line and others. And he has been the fellow of the Academy Solitude at Stuttgart in 2013 and 15. With that background, I request Amandeep to start his presentation.
Thank you, Ji. Sat Sri Akal to everyone. When Pratap Ji called me, asking me if I would come on this forum, I did not imagine that it was such an august gathering. And I did not at all imagine that all the 3 other speakers here are people from whom I have learned immensely. Kanwar Ji and I go back some time back to when he had just wound up Day and Night News, and then in the election campaign in Punjab, and later for the inauguration of my book at Chandigarh. Jodhka sir has been my teacher at University of Hyderabad. Not in my department, but I used to audit his classes. Dipankar sir, I don't know whether you'd remember or not, but in one of your journeys to Punjab, I had accompanied you. And that was in, I think, 2003 or 2. No, later. But the BT cotton had just come in, and we were going around Patiala district asking if this is a good variety of cotton. And the farmers at that time were very happy with it. And then you asked them that many environmentalists are saying this is going to be a problem. And they said, no, 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 we know this is good, because American bullworm had really affected the crop until then for 9 consecutive years. But by the time I got down to doing this book, 2015, BT cotton was the big issue because there was the white fly incident that had happened. This book of mine, I'm not as scholarly as all three speakers. And I think Pratap sir called me because of this book of mine. So I'll base my talk on this and on what is currently going on, because when the topic is revisiting Punjab past, revisioning future, then I, being more of a ground reporter, will talk about those two aspects. When I entered Punjab to start documenting it, to understand it actually, because as Sir said, I was born in Odisha, I lived mostly outside, though in the militancy years, I was in school in Punjab and I saw the reign of fear that was all around us. When a book like this is undertaken, it becomes a slice of time, mostly. But in that moment in time, you become aware gradually of the huge history behind Punjab of this time. And that to me is, I had gone to Punjab to look at it 25 years after militancy had ended. I just wanted to see, has peace returned? And I encountered huge disquiet and discontent in Punjab. But I was also looking at Punjab 50 years after the formation of the new state, 75 years almost after partition, about 100 years after the Gurudwara movement, about 125 years after Khan Singh Nabha's seminal book, Hum Hindu Nahi Hai, 150 years after the formation of the Singh Sabha, and 175 years after Punjab was annexed by the British. And remember, that Punjab which was annexed by the British is normally considered, it was Maharaja Ranjit Singh's empire. It's also considered Sikh empire. I have a problem with that, but this was a second Sikh empire, because before this, Banda Singh Bahadur had created his small territory, though, but a ruling in Punjab. So looking at Punjab in 2015 to 17, what I encountered here was, and that's why I named the book Fault Lines, because it seemed Punjab is very shattered by everything that has happened, but most of all by a sense of denial of justice. Now, justice is both the spirit of the law and the letter of the law. The sense of spirit of the law that the Sikh community at least holds on to is from the Guru period. The letter of the law of the Indian state had not really brought them solace. And there have been many, many breakages which needed to be bridged. For me, for my parents' generation, if partition was the biggest watershed moment, for me, the biggest watershed moment was Operation Blue Star. And neither Punjab was same before or after the event, nor was the Sikh community the same before and after the event. So it gave me a vantage point to look at what was happening here. And I'm not going into the book, but what I derived from these journeys and this, all that is in the book, is that Punjab is deeply hurting. And Punjab needs, as Dipankar sir said, a sense of healing. It was clear to me that unless we see Punjab as a post-conflict space, and this is actually maybe many post-conflicts. There's a post-conflict of the Green Revolution. There's a post-conflict of partition before that. There's a post-conflict of the militancy decade and a half, 78 to 93. I don't think we can bring healing to Punjab. But while I was looking at Punjab at the same time, and all other speakers have covered Blue Star before me, so let's go into some other area, which is the nation shifted from the Congress to the BJP. I see in this shift basically a change of scale, really. because what Congress was doing was, to me, soft Hindutva and maligning Punjab and the Sikh community. And what the BJP is doing is hard Hindutva, a call to a Hindu Rashtra. The very same idea of Khalistan, which was there, I agree with Pratap sir to an extent, because in my book, I described Khalistan itself as a word being limited because there are 4 distinct phases of history if you really look at it. And the current idea of Khalistan, which mostly comes from abroad, is basically an idea based on the intergenerational trauma of the next generation Sikhs who live abroad, and they feel that the human rights issue of Punjab has not been addressed. So I don't frown from the word. I just think it's a word which pushes the Indian state towards greater accountability, and there is no harm in that. And that is a sense of justice which has been denied. Many of those who, when I was growing up, used to preach secularism to us in the Khalistan movement period, suddenly became advocates of majoritarian Hindu nation. They are the ones which were supporting these powers who are now in power. The rights of minorities, the niceties of democracies, even the processes of the judiciary took a backseat. Healing for Punjab and for the nation, both were forgotten. Through various policies that the government enacted, demonetization, goods and service tax, what happened to Jammu and Kashmir, citizenship bill, and this drive towards the construction of a Ram Mandir and creation of Ram Rajya, basically the current regime is moving at breakneck speed to create this mythical Hindu Rashtra until now, when the second wave has really stalled that whole process. We suddenly see the government's huge inefficiency. These issues, not at the scale of the pandemic, but they happened with demonetization as well. They happened among the trading class with GST as well. They happened in this small state which was hugely under military presence in Jammu and Kashmir as well. And yet the government pursuing its Hindu-pleasing agenda basically pushed the Kumbh Mela, basically pushed the elections, and all of them creating shortages of oxygen, hospital beds, ventilators. Now, for the first time, I'm seeing that people are realizing that this mythical Rashtra we were pursuing is not really something which will give us deliverance from the ills that we have in the state right now. And Punjab has been in this problem for a long time. In fact, while traveling Punjab now, every community sort of feels that what their community or their region thinks today, India will think tomorrow. But I actually felt that while looking at the devastation of Punjab, I felt that what we are seeing here right now is what's the future of India. Last September, when the regime bulldozed the farm laws, it is once again, and it's deeply satisfying to me, because this Punjab that rose now against the farm laws is the Punjab I had inherited at birth from the stories my parents told me. That sense of justice for the right cause, that fight for the right battle. This Punjab, these farm protests have actually created that. And they've risen like a phoenix. Nobody expected Punjab to rise the way it has risen. Punjab was post-militancy, labeled with drugs, labeled with all sorts of other wrong names. And suddenly it is these very people who rose up. It mounted the protests very, very ably, supported by Haryana, supported by Western UP, supported by Rajasthan, some of Madhya Pradesh. And it is a joint farmers' protest. Its idiom, as Jodhka sir said, is to some extent the Sikhi idiom, but it is a protest of the people seeking justice against a regime which has actually devastated the whole nation part by part over the last 7 years. And this is a model of resistance. Now we have completed 6 months of the protest. Non-violent, steadfast, resilient, in spite of all sorts of weather conditions, cold, rain, storms, summer, they have just stood demanding the repeal of laws, demanding legalizing of MSP, which actually is not only a BJP creation. I mean, please, The distress in the rural sector is a feature of Indian state for the last 50 years. And now they have come up and they're asking for those. And to me, this is Punjab at its finest. It is standing for justice. Yet at the same time, inside Punjab, inside the state, its political and social system is in disarray. Unlike 2017, when I was covering Punjab, the coming elections in 2022, despite their dismal performance, their betrayal of the vows that they made, the Congress actually does not have much of an opposition. 2017, Kanwar sir would remember, was very, very tight, But this time it is not like that, because the Akalis have been diminished, but in my opinion, they should have been decimated by now. Yet the control of the core Sikh body, the SGPC, is still with the Akalis. Why hasn't it changed? This is something we can do within our community. We can change it. We have known that the Akalis have betrayed the cause of Punjab and the Sikhs, whichever definition of their own charter they might give, whether it is the original one or the 1996 one, when they said we stand for Punjabiyat, but the control is still with them. And unlike 2015-16, when AAP was building up, I don't see it building up right now. Hope it might, may not, I don't know. So Congress had it really clear for it. Jodhka sir asked a very interesting question. Why doesn't Punjab attract investment? And my answer to that is this nexus between the police and the politicians over all the wrongs of the dark decade and half, the militancy era, 1978 to 1993. That was a period when the legislative was absent. We had president's rule for 5 years. That's the period when the judiciary was recusing itself, even from cases on Operation Black Thunder. And the executive had just mostly become the police. The rest of the bureaucracy had disappeared. That is a time in which these extrajudicial killings happened, these disappearances happened, and neither the Akalis nor the Congress have been able to solve this issue. And today's Congress, instead of rectifying the wrongs that have happened in the past, the Akalis did not rectify it. People thought Congress will rectify it. It did not rectify it. It is busy infighting with each other for what? For deputy chief ministership in the next round if they win. I mean, look at this interesting thing. It's the same Punjab which has launched a model for nation, for the world, perhaps, through the farmers' movement. And it is the same Punjab which is unable to handle itself internally. And the issue has become really, at this point, the issue has become not even the 2015 to 16 sacrileges of the Granth Sahib and the other holy texts that were found in various bad conditions. The issue has actually become 2 innocents who lost their life in police firing at Bargadi. What is this? To me, Punjabi je kahege hathi lang gaya poonch reh gayi. Hun poonch nu fadi baithe, but poonch nu badi changi tarah fadya hoya inna ne. This anger that is coming from is, in my opinion, this long denial of justice to Punjab. Whether the killings of the militancy period or the after effect of the Green Revolution and the suicides by farmers and landless laborers. This is Punjab's long pent-up rosh. This is its anger. Punjab, when left to it, when it acts on its own, between the two situations, the farmers' protest and what is going on in Punjab, one can clearly see that when Punjab acts on its own, it rises. But when you impose this electoral system onto Punjab, it crumbles under it. And that is because, in my opinion, this electoral system by which we form governments completely misses the spirit of democracy. And the spirit of democracy is missed, in my understanding, as what Jean-Jacques Rousseau said, the social contract, which is a hallmark of modern democracy after the French Revolution. The social contract is at the core of modern democracy. But going back to Operation Blue Star, what happened then to me was the breakdown of the social contract between the citizens and the state. The citizens did not follow exactly what the state wanted them to do. And the state also encroached upon the articles of faith of the citizenry. And that has created this deep trust deficit in Punjab, which does not mend. It has not mended yet for 37 years, that one, what we are talking about right now. This trust deficit has to mend. Unless it mends, healing cannot start. Kanwar sir said about a truth commission. Yes, truth commission is very, very important. Papers being revealed of what happened in that period, very, very important. All other points mentioned, very, very important. But who will do it for us? We can't expect the Indian state to do it. And that is where I see the answer lies actually inside the problem. The farmers' protests right now are actually a healing touch for Punjab. How and when it plays out is to be seen, because the solidarities that the protests brought about, whether it is caste, or it is gender, or it is demographic, old and young, or it is ideological, from the left to the Panthic, or actually, as Pratap sir just was mentioning, police, day before yesterday night, there were huge storms in Delhi. And the tents, both of the farmers and the police kept. And I was just seeing videos of how the farmers and the police are helping each other put up their tents. And this is the Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan thing. And this is a schism that the powers that we are exploiting, because both the Jawan and the Kisan come from the same backgrounds. But you can't use taxpayers' money. You can't use, the national forces to play out personal agendas. And the country is now seeing through this. The country is now asking the regime, what have you done with the pandemic? That, and on top of it, the farmers' protest. And I really see this as a point where we might have our own ways of solving the issues, provided, very, very strongly provided, the solidarities we bridged during the protests are carried on after the protests and whenever they end. And that is a very, very, very big standard for Punjab to carry out. But the beauty of Punjab, in my opinion, is that you can never label it, you can never categorize it. It constantly reinvents itself. It is, to my mind, an ocean of forms. And it came up in the farmers' protest very beautifully. I just hope that that spirit, that unity continues, and actually the working classes, not only farmers and laborers, but all across, they all come together and they ask for a government which is accountable to the people. That will bring healing to Punjab. Thank you.
You finished?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much, Amandeep ji. I think you covered quite a fair amount of issues, starting with 84 downwards to the farm law and the protest which is going on. Now, everything, what you do today in Indian context for that purpose, farm laws have certainly brought in some major positive output. Now, they are trying to unite various sections of society within the Punjab, within Haryana, and UP. The good bonding has come up. A new leadership has emerged. And I'm sure in this, they consolidate their position well. They will do reasonably okay in times to come with the new elections, which are going to play a major role in shaping the country political scene in times to come. Now, I've been getting a lot of suggestion coming in that what India and what Punjabis and what the Sikhs should do. And I agree with most of them. First thing was the issue of the Khalistan slogan. Well, that's basically a misnomer started way back in 47 before that with a different motive. And now it's a different motive altogether, being exploited by some who would like to put it in a cold storage on that front. Whether the diaspora is doing or the Indian radicals are doing, they're very, very small number. And they are not very significant, and neither it will serve any purpose. The other thing which comes is the denial of justice. There's no doubt in that. Coming to the investment part of it, which has been said by most of the our panelists, the Punjab investment, I remember distinctly. The Infosys has started a very good unit in Mohali, and it was closed down for a couple of years later because there was too much of interference from the Punjab government. Now, unfortunately, our leadership in the Punjab has not been living in a present time and with a vision which was required to be done. You cannot, attract the investment without giving them some benefit. It has to be give and take position. Others have done it. We are so back foot on those front. With the result, the Infosys had gone back. And today you have no major industry in Punjab, barring the very medium and the low medium self-run being industry. Well, thank you very much. We proceed further now. I will request Mr. Ravinder Hujaji to read out. There is a resolution already drafted, and we are on the same issue what we've been just talking about the Truth Commission. That has been highlighted by us number of time, and we again on highlighted. I request him to read that thing, and we'll ask all our participants to give their views so that the whole thing can be revised to be the requirement before this resolution is formally sent to the Prime Minister of the country as well as released to the press. Mr. Hoja.
I read the resolution. We meet today on the 2nd of June 2021 to mark the 37th anniversary of the attack by the Indian Armed Forces on the Darbar Sahib, Amritsar, and 37 other historic Gurudwaras in the Punjab. The aggressive act of the Indian state against its own people and the sacred seat of Sikh faith, officially known as Operation Blue Star, resulted in death of thousands of innocent men, women, and children who were present in the holy shrine to pay their homage at the Gurudwaras. Many Sikhs were also killed elsewhere in Punjab during the military operations in the month of June 1984. Some months later came the horrific pogrom against the community in November 1984, when thousands of innocent Sikhs were brutally murdered in Delhi, the national capital, and in other parts of the country. The Sikh Forum has been holding 2 events every year continuously for the past 37 years, recalling Operation Blue Star in the first week of June and the anti-Sikh pogroms of November 1984 to keep the memory alive. Other Sikh organizations too have been doing this globally to keep the collective memory alive. Such incidents should never be forgotten, lest they be repeated. Over the last 37 years, the Sikhs, individually and collectively, along with other members of the civil society, have been demanding justice for those who were wronged by the Indian state. With the passage of time, it has become increasingly difficult to pursue the legal cases. However, the Sikhs continue to pursue justice. The Sikh Forum demands that the Government of India appoint a Truth and Reconciliation Commission that recalls all the incidences of violence against the innocent during the decade of the 1980s and asks for a reconciliation from those who suffered. Such a recording of crimes against the innocent and a recognition of the failure of the Indian police and the judicial system may help in making sure that such acts are not repeated in future. The Sikh Forum understands and recognizes that justice has to be an institutional practice No individual or community can be an island. Safety and security of the Sikhs is not possible in an environment that promotes hatred and enmity amongst groups and communities. This requires a fundamental change and in the national culture of doing politics and ensuring constitutional rights for all. Anybody who has any suggestions to make, may kindly do so.
Ravinder ji, good evening, sir. Jaspreet Singh here.
Hanji, good evening, Jaspreet ji.
Fateh ji, ki hal hai?
Bahut badhiya, Hanji.
Sir, we've been attending the talks over the years
Ji.
and repeatedly, sending letters to the government and so on and so forth. I think it's time that the community took on this challenge of trying to have the truth come out from their own resources, talking to people in the villages in Punjab whom they lost. I mean, till today, there's not even an accurate number of people who were lost during the various actions. We have the SGPC, the DSGMC. We have, we have all these bodies, but we keep appealing to the government. No government is going to do this. Whether it's the Congress or the BJP or whichever, even the Akali government has not done.
I think the past track record of the governments is nothing to give us a lot of solace.
May I answer this, Ujaji?
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely.
These are two different things.
Sir.
This is what we are talking about, Truth and Reconciliation Commission. This only government can do. The other part is to collect all the history and like the Sarkar has also said that we are preparing a documentary and also documenting all this record. So these are two separate and different things to be done at different levels. So here demanding from the government Truth and Conciliation Commission, that will go to the government. And I have one suggestion, Hujaji. We also add in this that demand from the government to declassify all the official documents and make it available in the public domain.
Thank you, Pulkaji. All these three issues, what you mentioned rightly, the Truth Commission, reconciliation, and the declassification document, we had taken up. This time, declassification document, we intentionally were trying to remove it because of the Truth Commission in cases form automatically implies on that. But we can include this word. There's no harm in that. I request all the participants. I request all the participants.
Pratap ji, I have a question.
Can I, by Baldeep Singh here, can I?
Just 1 second, please. We will certainly give you, we are running out short of time, but we'll take 2-3 questions.
Pratap ji, I have a question. Lali Sani.
Yes, I have noted on that. We'll give you time. Just 1 second. Now, the first my requirement is that kindly let us know in case you want the resolution to be slightly modified, anything more to be added. Mr. Fulka said reconciliation about the declassification document, that's accepted. Anything else?
I think
let's finish that and then we'll move forward.
What I'll have to share might add a couple of things. Yeah.
Please go ahead. Mute yourself.
Hanji. दो तीन गल्ला मैं सांझा करनी है. Today I was looking at listening to to President Biden. It's very important to look at another incident, that was Tulsa massacre. He was the first US president in 100 years, first ever president to visit the massacre site. There were a couple of things in his speech they are particularly noteworthy for us. And I quote him. He said, the only way to build a common ground is to truly repair and to rebuild. I came here to fill silence, because in silence, wounds deepen. And only, as painful as it is, only in remembrance do wounds heal. You just have to choose to remember. End quote. Jake Tapper of CNN noted after the president's speech that he did not know about the Tulsa massacre as a child and as a young adult. He only learned about it when he was in the media. That the carnage and the destruction of Tulsa by the white supremacists is not even taught about. Dr. Cornel West, who is a professor of the practice of public psychology, Harvard University, who participated in the discussion on CNN early today morning, said that there were two kinds of poverty that were inflicted post Tulsa massacre and other carnages that happened: the psychic poverty and economic poverty. Very, very important. Now, the role of the state at that time is almost like a mirror. And we need to take note, we need to remind that this is a global issue, not just a native issue. What was the role of the state? The white supremacists had used their private planes to bombard Tulsa and spray fire. No cases were ever filed. The judiciary was silent. No insurance company compensated. Reparations denied until today. Just imagine that only 3 witnesses have now survived. A lady of 107 years, the youngest, her brother, who's now 100. Tulsa was, as I mentioned, was not the only white supremacist carnage against the blacks. What if the Sikhs had no concepts such as seva, Vand Khao, Khand Khao, Sarbadda Pala, etc.? Even then, it is to be noted that such carnage as that happened in 84 cannot be inflicted on even the most humble of people. Now, lastly, the Anand Khand project to set up a conservatory exclusively dedicated to the study of arts, aesthetics, and cultural traditions at a thematically chosen locale of Sultanpur Lodi, Kapurthala, Punjab, is the only attempt to recover the intangible heritage of Gursikh Marg in the last 180 years. Sadly, the dispossession of the Kila Sarai Sultanpur Lodi of August 4, 2015, during Prakash Singh Badal-led government, and the inexplicable destruction of May 13, 2018, during Captain Amrinder Singh-led government, means that there is no place even for Gursikh heritage to live in the nation. The silence of the then CM and now the current CM of Punjab makes the Punjab government complicit in the destruction of the Gursikh heritage. Is there any Gursikh eyebrow raised? A community, lastly, the point I'm making is, a community that has no value for its unique cultural heritage can stand no chance to gain or regain its unique or nyara status in the society or in the comity of nations. As long as the Sikhs adorn themselves with the Chalta Hai approach with regards to their precious heritage endowed by the Gurus, including Santhya. How many of people present have undergone the actual Santhya Vidhi? With, the others will match with their own Chalta Hai approach towards the Sikhs and Sikhi. Sikhs are not just to be a part of a variety show. What exactly is the relevance of Sikhi to the nation and to the world today? What do they have to offer to the world? The question with which I will rest my voice.
Thank you.
Can I add something to this?
Point that has very well said. Just 1 second, please. Hold on. We'll come back to you. Baldeep ji, you very rightly said, your heritage part, we did cover a few years back with person coming out from Amritsar all the way to talk about the heritage preservation in Punjab. And it's a sad state of affairs because the government is not interested to do anything valid on that issue.
The conservation that I'm talking about is a total different level. This is not a token. This is not token.
I know your efforts, your personal efforts are commendable. And not just kindly continue. We are there to support you.
There is zero support. By the way.
Now that you have said a lot of things, we have a small time left now. There are 2-3 questions. One is the Chandrapreet from Bangalore. Kindly finish up in 2 minutes time only. Please go ahead with your question.
Thank you, Pratap sir. I had a long list of questions, but I'll restrict myself to 1 or 2 only. Before I ask my questions, I have one suggestion that when we are discussing about revisioning future, I would have appreciated more that we would have larger participation from the present generation in the seminar. I truly learned a lot of things from all the speakers, and I appreciate the August House, but I think more participation from the present generation is required when we are talking about how to revision the future, although I don't know what the earlier vision was. My first question is that how are we looking for moving ahead, taking 1984 as the watershed movement, because I hear from a lot of Sikh voices that democracy is not going to help the Sikh community in the traditional way. We lack belief in the rule of law. Also, at some point, we don't understand or we don't believe in the federation and all the constitutional structure that we have built in. So how are we trying to move ahead if we are considering 84 as a watershed movement? Second point is that I find most of the Sikh intellectuals, when they are talking to the national press, we don't have a clear stand on the Khalistan or the issue of Sant Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale. I understand that we might be divided in our views, but when it comes to facing the national media and creating a narrative about it, we become apologetic, and we don't have a clear stand how to deny it or to accept it or to assert our identity about the events which happened in 1984. And my last question is, have we romanticized the idea of seva? When organizations like Khalsa Aid and United Sikhs come in front, we as a community start sharing pictures, videos, and self-praising ourselves. Even other communities also praise ourselves, but we are not able to convert that social capital into political capital.
So thank you, Jalanpreet ji.
I'd like to speak. I got a point.
I
want to speak for a minute.
Yeah.
Can you give me a few seconds?
Kindly.
Sir, my submission is right from the day one, Sikh Forum has never accepted the concept of Khalistan. In this resolution we are passing, it will pass also, earlier also, I reiterate to add, to distribute the Indian mind of idea of Khalistan. The Sikhs are Indians first and Indians last. We live in this Indian constitution. Guru Maharaj has given us Chardi Kala. We never accepted ourselves as a minority. We are, in spite of whatever we are, Sabha Sahib se ek ladao, that concept we have always maintained and retained. So my submission is that we should, this very idea of Khalistan from the Indian mind must be disabused. These poor farmers being called Khalistanis. I, as a general of the Indian Army, I've been told Khalistani. I will rebuke those people, and they have all apologized to me. On this forum, I'm surprised many people have spoken about Khalistan. Khalistan has never been a concept among the Sikh community. Barring aside, some agencies created some agents to speak of Khalistan. So this must be completely from the Indian mind disabused. The Sikhs are not for Khalistan, and we are for Indian, live with the Indian constitution. Why do you call so right today?
Thank you, Jan Sahib. You clarified the position. Please hold on. Hold on. There is another gentleman who's waiting for a long time with the Lali Sani. Kindly you have a 1 minute time and finish up your point if you have any.
Sir, I need 1 minute.
Surinder ji, please hold on. Let Lali.
It's been a pleasure and an honor to all the distinguished people, and my question in specific is to Mr. Kanwar Sandhu, and I come with the capacity of an individual blessed with 3 beautiful children. My eldest Sifat Kaur Sahib. My question is that, but I am really not able to suggest a role model to my children in terms of a successful Sikh who's acceptable pan-Indian. Have we somewhere, we've been very successful people, sole proprietorship businesses and, whatever we've done. But as a community, I mean, some of the leaders I don't wish to name are nothing else but land mafia and political stooges. I feel there is a big void in terms of credible individual. जो बाकी लोगों ने लिखा कि खालिस्तान the issue में किसी issue review करने लिए there has to be an individual who has credibility across the community. I don't find any. I would want Mr. Kanwar Sandhu to please enlighten me if I am totally living in a well or.
Thank you. Kanwar Sandhu ji hai?
leadership?
Unmute yourself, ji. Kanwar ji, please unmute yourself.
ਤੁਸੀਂ ਥੋੜਾ ਮਿਊਟ ਕਰ ਲਓ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਪ ਨੂੰ ਹਰਿੰਦਰ ਜੀ ਥੋੜਾ kindly mute yourself ਹਾਂਜੀ
Can you hear me?
Mic is also on.
yes
Kanwar Sandhu here, can you hear me?
yes we can hear you, kindly go ahead.
I think the point that has just been raised is there is a very big crisis of leadership. And Punjab has faced this crisis of leadership for the last almost about, I think, 30 to 40 years. We've had governments come in, but we haven't had a leader. I don't think we've had a leader after Pratap Singh Karon, who was acceptable and who could unite the people and who could take the Punjab forward the way he could. So yes, there is a crisis. Two other points that were raised briefly, I'd like to touch on those. I think, the whole problem had started with Punjab asking for its rights, asking for a proper setup. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. And after that, the whole issue has gone into the background. I think Punjab, the government, the people of Punjab need to also reach out to the other states, which are also asking for more powers to the states to have a proper federal setup. I also feel that we need to leverage our NRI strength. Unfortunately, there is a discord, but we need to leverage our NRI strength, and this also depends on having a good leader in Punjab who can actually win over the confidence of the NRIs. As far as the Khalistan issue is concerned, I personally feel that I think this issue, Khalistan, should be accepted only as a notional concept to unite the people. As, let's say, the people of Jewish origin in Israel. I'm not supporting the Israel policy vis-a-vis the Middle East, but the only way to unite the people should this concept be used, not to divide the country or to ask for a separate state. Because asking for a separate state is a very dangerous concept. It could throw the people of Punjab, the Sikhs, into a huge insecure, into an area of insecurity. So I think we need to use this to unite the people. As unfortunately, Operation Blue Star was an unfortunate step, but the one thing that it did was united the people. So I think that is the way it's supposed to be. Thank you. Sir, how do we take care of the leadership issue? The answer, I would want to have an answer if possible, sir. Well, I think there is a crisis of leadership, and the people have been trying since 2012. They have been seeking an alternative to the Congress, the traditional parties like the Akali Dal. They tried the People's Party. They did not succeed. Then they tried the Aam Aadmi Party. I think they were disappointed there again. And now they are seeking an alternative at this point of time. Let's see if they can find one. Some people thought that maybe the farmers could provide an alternative, but then the farmers have their strength only in the rural areas. So possibly, I think the crisis can be taken care of if the educated Sikhs, I won't say the intellectuals, but the educated Sikhs, people who feel for Punjab, if they get together and can cobble up a kind of leadership which is acceptable to the people. I'm sorry, I don't have a clear answer. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you have answered the question. I have one last question from Harmandar Singh. Kindly say, just since I've been 1 minute, 2 minutes time, we are getting so late, everybody will be cursing me otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'm honored. And
unmute yourself and come up.
Thank you, sir. I'm honored. I'll take less than 2 minutes.
Okay.
We've spent 2 hours, and at the best point I like raised by Charanpreet Singh, which will cover all the points in one go. And it says we are not taking our social advantage into political advantage. This is one. Number 2, there is no term as Khalistan as such. It's always been land of 5 rivers. So let me correct. It's land of 5 rivers. It's not Khalistan. Thank you.
Does anybody like to say, Amandeep, Amandeep, would you like to say something on?
Yeah, just a point on Kanwar sir's point on political party from farmers' side. The issue is not only they are active in the rural areas, but if you really look at, and I know we are an urban group here, and I'm deliberately bringing this point of view into it, because roots, even our roots lie in rural India, in rural Punjab, pre-partition or post-partition. The issue with farmers coming up with a political party or creating a kind of leadership is specifically this, that they know that any political party that comes up in India right now or in Punjab will be within the framework of a neoliberal structure, and a neoliberal structure which has already devastated our education, which has already devastated our universal health care, as is being seen right now, and which has had a deep impact on many other aspects of our lives. And this was since the 90s, we have been following it. We could not model it onto rural India itself. So while urban India benefited, rural India did not. And the farmers and the other groups who are active, who have mounted this big protest right now, they're very aware that if they become a political party, they will fall prey to the same trap. So the thinking has to be out of the box and how to challenge neoliberalism from inside by making a party, which I think can come from urban Punjab if possible, but that's to be seen. The elections are right at hand right now.
Thank you, Harmandeep. Thank you. Thank you very much. The last word from Surinder Jodhka before I move forward. Last 1 minute word from Surinder Jodhka.
I will not take even 1 minute. I think this difference of opinion is very good. And I think we should keep disagreeing. We should keep kind of articulating. And I think that's the democratic spirit in which I think community lives. And we should keep articulating positions from ground. And we have our position. We have Faujis amongst us. We have Kisan among us. We also have middle class Dukandars among us. So all kinds of diversity should come up in opinions. I think Sikh Forum should provide that platform. One thing that we all stand for is justice, is something that, you know, as a community we should prosper, but that doesn't mean that we should all agree on one thing, and that's what we should pursue. Thank you very much for listening to us.
Well, thank you very much. You summed up the whole thing so well for me. The Charanpreet point was, you know, the participation. We will certainly like to organize more of these seminars for the youth and other people who are interested, wherein we can discuss all these issues one by one and see where we can take it forward. Now, Sikh Forum being a
next time we should make a point that one of the speakers should be below 40 years old.
Okay.
That is a challenge for the Sikh Forum.
That's a very good suggestion.
Yeah.
The point what you said is very valid. So we'll have to involve the youth in that, and we'll have a speaker specially asked for under 40. So there's no problem in that. The issue which has been raised by some of the audience and clarified by our panelists, they are very, very valid. Now, the present scene, as we see, everybody sees today, the rural Punjab and the urban Punjab. There is a big divide there itself, but we'll have to have the educated rural and the urban Punjab getting together for the next political scene, which is going to come up very soon. That's one issue. The second is the divide within the rural on the caste line, especially the Dalit being ignored, not being, you know, which is creating a lot of rift basically. Though some improvement has taken place as a result of the farm laws and the the labor, the landless laborers, but this can be now mobilized and where the things can move in a forward direction to take help of everybody, the Dalit, the untouchable, so-called untouchable, and the farmless labor, the migrant labor. They all have to be migrant labor. Ludhiana, for example, have tons of vote to be to their credit. No, they'll all have to be taken together for a right cause so that they are not exploited and we can bring a good leadership. Let's pray to the Almighty that we have a leadership coming up which can play a constructive role for taking forward Punjab in his own old pristine glory. Now, coming with that, I'm coming to an end basically. I only have one small request that we at Sikh Forum will be looking forward to youth under the age of 40, anything from 35 to 40 or 45, those who can spare some time for the forum job, for their forum participation and giving their valuable suggestion, we would like to invite their membership and kindly get in touch with us. It's my number is available, or you can have the sikhforum84@gmail.com. Send us the thing, we'll send you the form, become active member of the forum, get involved, and then let's see in case we can move on in different direction. We are a non-political and non-religious association, but we take care of the interest of everybody. Nobody is untouchable for us. We are not in conflict with anyone. At the same time, we are approachable for everybody. And let's make use of the facility of this platform and move forward. I will now request Mr. Sardar Surinder Singh Huja to say a word of thanks before we close this meeting. Thank you.
Mr.
Before you, I was going to say, I raised up my hand. This is Gurpreet Singh. This is on your resolution. To see resolution,
okay, we'll take that. No problem. We'll take that.
To see resolution, which to see you mentioned only the attack on the Bar Sahib and the pogrom. I think further ahead you've gone and mentioned, of course, the 80s, the decade of the 80s. But I think in that same line, you please mention not only the attack on the Bar Sahib and the pogrom, but up to 92, because it is a proven fact that these killings, unjudicial killings, and all these things continued in Punjab till 92. So I think that needs to be added, because we should not forget that what transpired after 84 to 92 was also a pain that Punjab suffered and continues to suffer, because there has been no justice for that either. So I think thank you.
Thank you, Jodhka.
Pratap Singh ji, 1 minute. Pratap Singh ji, Miss Ahluwalia has been trying to say something for last 15 minutes. Please give us some time.
You have a last 30 seconds time, not more than that. Kindly go ahead.
Guru Fateh to everybody. I just wanted, I was hearing everybody and
you have 1 minute time. Kindly go ahead.
Yeah. I was trying to understand that why is a narrative still saying we want justice? Why are we in that mode? Why can't we say it is our right now to get justice and remind the government or the state that what is the Sikh contribution towards Indian development, and as Indians, what is our contribution? So if we do not say it is our right, we'll always be in a wanting mode or a begging mode, which we are not there for. So we have to make this very clear at some point. Now it's been 37 years. Why can't we say now that tell them that what we stand for, what are we doing as Indians for India? And if we don't bring that forward, we will still be like marginalized, and we'll still say, Sanu justice chahiye.
Thank you, Harpreet ji. I think we've taken your point.
If you can take that.
We have taken your point, and we'll see what best can be done on that. What Mr. Gurpreet said, Gurpreet Singh has said was, the program normally we take up for the 84 November, the resolution which goes on that is mentioned on June. We do not normally mention that, but we'll go through the whole thing in case it's feasible, we can even add that, there's no problem. The last was one, Mr. Avatar Singh wanted to say something. We have 30 seconds before we close the whole thing.
Well, Sat Sri Akal to everybody. I just want to say 1 or 2 points. One is that the Sikhs are being used by all the governments, whether it's Congress or BJP. We are needed when we have to guard our borders. Otherwise, Sikhs have not been given a fair deal any time in the history of India. And we have to we have to have a good leadership who takes it and who fights with the government. In fact, there is no time left. You and the last speaker speaking at this time. Otherwise, I wanted to say a few things. I was the one who was attacked. Just 15 seconds more. Nobody would understand more than me because yes. In 1984, I was attacked. My house was attacked because I had returned from Pakistan after doing the commentary between India and Pakistan cricket series. And my house was attacked because the people said, this is the person who came from Pakistan. They did not know what did I go there for. But somehow with the God's grace, I was saved, my family was saved. So I know that, and I would request everybody to put in our might and tell whatever the government is that we need our space in the country. You have seen 26th of January, what happened on 26th of January at Red Fort. After that, the Hindus came to Gurudwara Sahib and demonstrated outside the Gurudwara, and they forgot that our gurus, Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji, Guru Gobind Singh Ji, fought for the Hindus, but they forgot everything and they demonstrated outside the Gurudwara. That is what I want to say. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. We'll not take more questions and no more, right? I think you have given your first point was very valid. Till such time the present government or any government has that purpose, correct the narrative, things will happen in India, things will happen to minority, things will happen to Sikhs. So we got to guard ourselves, we got to prepare ourselves, not only for the seva, but education. Education means a higher education, the civil services, the central services all over India, so that you are part of the decision-making process in case we have really move forward in the society and get some justice. Mob mentality in India with the present regime or any regime for that purpose will always be there. There are leaders who will exploit the masses and nothing can be done at that time. Nobody is going to stop it. Something damage has been done is done. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. And I pass on to Mr. Ravindra Huja.
Thank you, Pratapji. Mr. Kanwar Sandhu, Professor Jodhka, Professor Dipankar Gupta, and Mr. Amandeep Sandhu. You've provided us an evening which has been an evening of very, very high content. The speakers have displayed fantastic firepower. One thing that is evident in the whole thing is the total absence of leadership in the country, a void which we've been feeling for some time, and to which I don't see any answer coming very quickly. We need to work on it. Without going into the details of what each person has spoken, I would say that it's been very interesting because the same problem, same issue that was given to all the four speakers took it on in a very intelligent, interesting manner, but with four different aspects were taken up by each one of them. And that made the whole evening very, very interesting. And I appreciate the sense of participation and the question answers that all of you asked and the answers by the experts for the day. And with that, thank you very much for being with us. As always, we've gone a little beyond time, but we appreciate all of you holding on. And so have a good evening. We'll do our best. We welcome your suggestions and your sense of participation. Thank you very much once again. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Thank you, Ravindra Ji. And I must thank all those participants coming from US.